Hello, I'm Mike Pollard, and I'm going to be talking about Oxfordshire's Nature Recovery Network. Um, I've been working with Wild Oxfordshire on this project for the past few months. I've been chairing a steering group specifically tasked with developing a draft and nature recovery network for Oxfordshire. But I've been involved with Wild Oxfordshire for quite a few years. I used to be a trustee, and also I worked for the RSPB for about 30 years, developing nature reserves, and also I was involved in landscape scale conservation partnership projects as well. You can contact me at Wild Oxfordshire, my email address below, and you can find out more about nature recovery networks on the Wild Oxfordshire website. We're really keen to get your feedback and ideas this evening as well. How can we use the Nature Recovery Network to put nature into recovery? You know, the concept is still at quite an early stage. We've got a lot to learn, and we need your ideas, your enthusiasm, your innovation, to take it forward. And what support would be the most help to you? You know, here at Wild Oxfordshire, we've got the ability to give you some support, but we're part of a much bigger network and partnership. So between us, we should be able to provide you with more support going forward. So to start off with, what is a nature recovery network? Well, put simply, it's a joined up system of places that's needed to expand and connect the remaining fragments of nature so that nature can recover and thrive. Essentially, it's the places where nature is more abundant at the moment, and it's the places where habitats need to be restored or created. And together, this will create a future nature recovery network where nature can be recovering and starting to thrive and recovering that lost ground. Why is a nature recovery network needed? Well, we know that nature is declining globally at rates unprecedented in human history. There's a lot of evidence, it's very, very compelling now. We've seen it ourselves. Scientists have demonstrated this, on numerous occasions. And here in the UK, we've seen no let up in the net loss of nature in the UK. And this was shown particularly by the State of Nature Partnership and the most recent State of Nature 2019 publication really emphasised this. And here in Oxfordshire, we've seen a continued fragmentation and loss of connectivity across the county's landscapes, and this is affecting the future viability of habitats and species. And some of these are amongst our most iconic sort of wildlife. Two species currently at high risk of extinction here in Oxfordshire. I'm sure you can think of others, but two particularly to note: the turtle dove. It's down to less than a handful of pairs, maybe just down to 2 or 3 pairs in Oxfordshire. And the wood white, which may even have disappeared by now, I'm not quite sure, down to, just a pale shadow of what it was previously and just found in the Burnwood Forest area. So Nature Recovery Network is needed to start to turn things around, to put nature into recovery, because we've had a long period of decline and loss. And one of the main rays of hope, if you like, that may be setting us back onto a more positive course was the sort of establishment of the government's 25-year environment plan recently. And this includes a commitment to develop a nature recovery network for the country that restores and protects wildlife and provides opportunities to reintroduce species that we've lost from our countryside. This is led by DEFRA, but it's working across government departments, and it's reporting annually on progress. And you can see there that the current state of play, not great, I'm afraid, as we would expect. The indicator in orange there with a downward arrow, that's the abundance and distribution of priority species in the UK. That is still going downwards. So there's a lot to do, as we know. Here in Oxfordshire, as I mentioned, we've had a steering group developing the concept, and a really broad partnership of organisations have come together to really start driving this forward. And put simply, we've developed a vision and an aim for the network. We want a vision where the future environment is rich in wildlife and valued for all. And the aim is to double the extent of land of high value for nature in the county by 2050. And this is aligned with this ambition across the Oxford to Cambridge arc, for that whole landscape where nature needs to recover, and we need to really extend and expand the areas of high quality land where nature can thrive. The current work that we've done on the Nature Recovery Network for Oxfordshire has actually responded to an opportunity to help shape the Oxfordshire plan for up to 2050. This is very much sort of long-term strategy to take forward Oxfordshire's economy, health and well-being, and environment sort of coherently. So to set the overall strategic agenda. And if there's a really positive outcome from this, it will be, the environment taken fully into account in looking spatially at how we take the Oxfordshire overall environment forward. So what we've been able to do with the Nature Recovery Network is input this into the Oxfordshire Plan thinking, the spatial analysis that they've been doing, so that there's a much greater opportunity of win-wins where development avoids the more sensitive areas, and where the multiple benefits from the Nature Recovery Network, for example, for health and well-being, for food production, they can all sort of be stacked up. The work we've done to date has been a close collaboration between the Wildlife Trust, BBOWT, and the Thames Valley Environmental Records Centre and Wild Oxfordshire. But it's been very, heavily supported by our local authorities and by other partners, including the AOMBs and many other organisations, many of you here this evening. It's also been validated by the Biodiversity Advisory Group for Oxfordshire. How should the Nature Recovery Network actually be used? Well, there's quite a few different ways of using the network concept, and as I mentioned, it's still quite early stages, so more will be developed, I'm sure, as we go forward with it. One of the key things at the moment is to use the network to develop a nature recovery strategy. So the strategy will set out how nature recovery can be implemented in each area, and most places this is based on a county approach. And a strategy is currently in development for a pilot strategy within Buckinghamshire at the moment. And within Oxfordshire, would expect a strategy to start coming forward in the next couple of years. We need to use the Nature Recovery Network also to make, strategic land use decisions that help nature's recovery at whatever scale that we're working with. And we need to better target activity and investment to generate the best outcomes for the natural environment. So knowing where the investments can most pay dividends, if you like, for nature. I'll come on to that in a moment. And it should help us to build nature recovery actions into our local decision making. I've got a few slides now just to talk you through how a nature recovery network is developed, and it's all based on the Lawton principles, and these come from the sort of really groundbreaking report from 2010 led by Sir John Lawton, the Making Space for Nature review. And it basically establishes some core principles for nature recovery that we need bigger, better, more, and joined. And to apply that in Oxfordshire, we've used a simple three-tier system of 3 nature recovery zones. So we've got a core zone, which is the sort of real core existing nature sites. And this is based on site data held by the Thames Valley Environmental Records Centre. Then we've got a recovery zone based on habitat connectivity analysis for woodland and grassland, and based on an established freshwater network developed by the Freshwater Habitats Trust. And then we've also got a wider landscape zone that is all the other parts of the county. So just running through how those fit onto the Lawton model, we've got our core zone, our core areas. We've got our recovery zone that buffers and links together habitat patches. And we've got our wider landscape zone that covers the rest of the county, because there are important conservation actions that can take place anywhere in the landscape, really, that are all going to contribute. So it's important that we don't just look at the core and recovery zones. So a little bit more flesh on the bones of the three zones. So the core zone, it includes all of Oxfordshire's current nature conservation assets. So everything's in there, that sites that we know about that are important for nature. And going forward, these will need, a high level of protection, management, and enhancement. Some of these are already designated sites. Some of them are simply mapped as priority habitat. But in the core zone, we'll need to improve habitats and restore natural ecosystems. We'll need to target the agri-environment schemes. We can deliver biodiversity net gain, although remembering that these sites are already good for nature, so maybe that'll be quite modest. And we definitely need to avoid development. In the recovery zone, we've really got these are the best opportunities for nature's recovery. It's the priority area for habitat creation and restoration. It needs to be a focus for the agri-environment schemes and a focus for off-site biodiversity net gain. It creates opportunities for accessible natural green space near towns. Again, we want to avoid major built development in the recovery zone. And it presents opportunities for biodiversity-led mineral site restoration, natural capital investment, carbon offsets, potentially rewilding as well of areas of low agricultural value, and the establishment of big nature areas. This is the concept of areas over 5,000 hectares, which are real sort of engines of biodiversity, within an area. And then we've got the wider landscape zone as well, where nature thrives everywhere, where we see nature-friendly farming on a bigger scale. Again, we've got accessible natural green space around our towns and villages. We can apply, natural flood management practice, new woodlands, no doubt, and developments where they happen, will be delivering biodiversity net gain as well. So there's a lot to play for in the wider landscape zone. And holistically, together, this whole sort of suite of action to deliver a nature recovery network will include things like natural flood management. It will include biodiversity net gain, new woodlands, nature after minerals, the agri-environment schemes, rewilding, nature-friendly farming, and habitat restoration. So there's a lot in that toolkit. Some will be more important than others. The agri-environment schemes will be particularly critical. Okay, so this map shows you how our draft nature recovery network is looking for Oxfordshire. If you just settle on this map for a few moments, you can see the core zone in dark green. You can see the recovery zone in that middle green and the wider landscape zone in the pale green. And you might be able to pick out some of those familiar landscapes, some of the Chilterns woodlands, the downland of the Ridgeway, the Otmore and Upper Ray floodplains, the Witchwood Forest, Cherwell Valley, and the Thames floodplain meadows around Oxford, Whiton Woods, etc. Lots of places there familiar. And we've not forgotten our conservation target areas. All of the conservation target areas now sit within the recovery zone, and of course will include quite a lot of the core zone. Just a quick refresher on conservation target areas. They were identified in 2006, and now they're well embedded in local plans, and they represent the concentration of priority habitats and species in our area. And they include surrounding land that can buffer and link the habitats. So we're a little bit of a precursor, if you like, to the Nature Recovery Network concept. While Oxfordshire supports the network of CTA leads, these are people that sort of coordinate work within a conservation target area, and practitioners who are obviously taking forward nature recovery. And basically the Nature Recovery Network should be building on the conservation target area concept, updating it and taking it forward. And this is just a reminder really about the importance of accessible natural green space and that we build this into the nature recovery network, because this will be driven by the needs of people more as much as, you know, the needs of nature. So at the moment, the map doesn't identify, broadly speaking, the sufficient opportunities for accessible natural green space. So that's something we need to look at the next stage, because we really need to ensure, particularly now in the light of the COVID-19 pandemic, and the importance of accessible local green space has really stood out. And there's multiple benefits of locating this close to towns. And interestingly, the recent concept of the wild belt put forward by the Wildlife Trust offers a lot of potential, I think. Okay, so that covers really the sort of principles, if you like, of the nature recovery network. How do you go about actually putting it together in your patch? Well, there's some good guidance available, and a key document, if you like, to refer to. I'll mention it a bit further on, but it's this one by Natural England, very recent report, which is called the Nature Network's Evidence Handbook. And it's quite a lengthy document. There's plenty of detail in there. There's also a summary guide as well. But essentially, it picks out a 6 sort of principles, if you like, in terms of developing a network for your particular area. First of all, of course, you need to understand your place. Then you'd need to develop a vision based on that understanding, and based on, you know, all the thinking that's going on in your area, and strategically on a wider sort of compass. You need to involve people, all stakeholders, people with a, you know, an interest, who maybe live in that area, or sort of, you know, have a strong interest. And then you need to looking at, you know, following those Lawton principles, you need to create core sites. So what have you got already? How can you build on those? Can you create some new ones? And how do you build resilience into this network for the long term, thinking about climate change and perhaps longer term pressures on the environment? And how do you embrace dynamism? So enabling nature to lead the recovery process, if you like, so freeing up nature to do more sort of rewilding, if you like. It's a bit of as an example of that, but natural flood management is another great example. So embrace dynamism, and, you know, the likelihood that, as we know, we're going to have a more chaotic climate going forward. And it's important to remember that, you know, you can have big strategies and big plans, and some things do take a long time to put together, but some things can be achieved quite quickly. And I was really heartened to see this little tweet the other day from the Windrush Valley, and the results, sorry, Windrush Village, and the results of the work they've done to restore some wildflower grassland in their village. And they actually had a village vote to in favour of this, which was a great way of doing it. And they've already had lots of lovely wildflowers coming up in their village, including these wonderful bee orchids. Something I did about a year ago was collect some acorns from one of my local woods that's going to be badly affected by HS2, and I managed to grow 5 little oak trees there. That's how much they grew in a year from their early from an acorn. And just a couple of weeks ago, I was able to plant some of these out in one of our local nature reserves, where we needed to create some more more canopy, a sort of scrubby nature reserve near Hook Norton. These are just examples. So think vision, think big picture, think what could be achieved long term, but also think, you know, what can we achieve to start kicking things off. So what I thought would be useful is just to look at this on the map and take a couple of examples. The first one is the Wardington parish in North Oxfordshire, which is where I happen to live. And the second one is the Long Whittenham with Little Whittenham parish, which is where Wild Oxfordshire base, and which is sort of quite a hub now for a sort of nature conservation action. But obviously you could take any particular area. These two are quite nicely contrasting, though, in their interest and potential. So this map shows you the Wardington parish. It's sort of triangular shape there, with the Wardington village sort of over to the right. it's quite a linear village. You've got a smaller village, Williamscott there, and you've got a lot of farmland as well. And you've got the River Cherwell running along the sort of northwest boundary, and a disused railway along the southern edge. But this map simply shows you where the nature recovery zone is for the Wardington parish. So you can see some quite small blocks of core zone. Some of them are isolated, some of them are actually within the recovery zone. And the recovery zone really is the River Cherwell. So it's the freshwater network that you can see there dotted around. And then you've got the wider landscape zone across the broad sweep of land there. So not much of Wardington Parish is in the in the recovery zone. Most of it's in the wider landscape zone. Now, first thing to do perhaps is, having got that overall view of how the nature recovery network is currently sort of set up for Wardington, is to look at the priority habitats. And there's a number of sources of information, but basically the two main sources are Natural England and the Thames Valley Environmental Records Centre. The priority habitats inventory from Natural England is open source. You can download that data, or you can look at it on the Magic website. This map simply shows the parts of the core zone in Wardington that are priority habitats inventory, shown in orange, and the other parts of the core zone that are other elements. So these might be other nature reserves. They might be local wildlife sites that aren't in the priority habitats inventory. They've got some other interest that's been mapped. They might be priority habitats that Thames Valley Environmental Record Centre have mapped, but aren't yet on the priority habitats inventory held by Natural England. So there's an element of investigation needed to start this off. And then if you open up the priority habitats inventory, you'll see a number of different habitats. And can you just, if you just look at this map for a little while, you see the orange picks out quite clearly. That's what's called good quality semi-improved grassland. So good quality is more species rich. So, yes, here are some areas important for botanical interest. You've also got in yellow there, particularly a lowland meadow, surviving lowland meadow, and that is really, really important. That's an incredibly rare habitat now. But look, you've also got traditional orchards, okay, 3 orchards there, surviving. You've also got some small patches of deciduous woodland, and you've got some other habitats there, which you probably need to investigate a bit more what that is. And you've got some areas of core zone. At this stage, we don't know too much about. I've got my personal knowledge of the area, so I know the habitats, but Thames Valley Environmental Record Centre will have that data. So now's the time to, you go and ask them for that data to fill in those gaps. But based on that overview of Wardington Parish, you can see it's got some special characteristics. It's got mixed farmland. You can see that from the aerial imagery as well. You've got the River Cherwell and its feeder streams. You've got grassland, including species rich. You've got a lot of boundary habitats. You've got some small woods and orchards. So that gives you a nice sort of framework, if you like, for this is what we've got to work with. And being a parish group, you may well be focusing on the areas around where people live. So I've just focused here on the Wardington village itself and picked out the areas that we know about from habitat inventory, and also some areas that I know from my local knowledge haven't yet been mapped. So I think this is really to emphasize that you may well need to do some more surveys and some more investigation, which is fun to do, but it's also important to do. So you've got the full picture. And also you can add that habitat information to the Thames Valley Environmental Record Centre database. So for example, I know that there is a colony of swifts nesting in one of the buildings at the north end of the village in Lower Wardington. I know the churchyard is actually really nice in parts for wildflowers as well, including the mouse-eared hawkweed. And I know down here, on nearly opposite where I live, there's a little a group of cowslips on one of the greens that we're now working with the parish council to conserve and enhance the grassland there. There's also, yes, there's also a field here and really nice little meadow here with an expanding colony of meadow saxifrage, again quite a scarce plant and a good indicator of relatively unimproved grassland. So you're starting to build more of a picture, but it's, it will take some time, some investigation, some survey work, talking to people, maybe getting some experts in to help you. So that's Waddington. I'm now looking at Long Wittenham and Little Wittenham Parish. This is a very green slide, so it shows the core zone there in quite a bright shade of green. You've got the recovery zone in the middle green there, very expansive actually, and this is a big section of the sort of River Thames, and you've got some areas of ancient woodland as well. So you'd expect the recovery zone to be quite substantial here. And we've also got, of course, a lot of the wider landscape zone. And if we zoom in in the same way into this area, you can see, again, the habitat makeup of this area, but there's a lot more here already, as you can tell. It's got a different characteristic to Waddington. You've got a big area of ancient woodland, and you've got other areas of woodland. In fact, again, as for Waddington, some areas that haven't yet been mapped. For example, here in red, here in red, you've got an area of new woodland, and here up here as well along the river, I know there are areas of floodplain grassland with some interest, botanical interest, and wetland features as well that might qualify for part of the core zone. You can also see patches here again of semi-improved grassland of high quality and hay meadows. So a really nice mix of habitats and plenty of scope to build on. But remember, the majority of this parish is sitting within the recovery zone. So you'd really expect and anticipate a lot more habitat restoration and creation in this area in the future. Perhaps with a focus, as I say, on the special characteristics, the woodland habitats, the species-rich grassland, and enhancing the farmland as well. I mentioned support and information is available. At Wild Oxfordshire, we've got Roselle and the Wild Oxfordshire team. If you're not already a member, do join and become part of our supportive network. You've got the Thames Valley Environmental Records Centre with their habitat and species maps. They can be provided free of charge to a local group if it's just for conservation use. So do get in touch with TVERC, make sure you make the most of that resource. And a couple of handbooks. I mentioned the Natural England document, the Nature Networks document. There's 2 publications. This is the summary for practitioners. Then there's a more detailed full-length document available as well. And the Wildlife Trusts have recently published a Nature Recovery Network handbook, which again has got a lot of useful principle practice. And it's also, that handbook is seeking to influence a government policy to maximize, the opportunity to develop nature recovery networks within government legislation, particularly with the Environment Bill going through Parliament at the moment, and an Environment Act likely to go through next year. This should strengthen nature recovery networks. Next steps, well, it's a huge challenge for us to take forward nature recovery networks, but it's a huge opportunity and something we really need to engage with positively, inject our skills, our energy, enthusiasm, knowledge. We've got to remember that the map we've got at the moment is a draft, but it's a very much it's a well advanced, well developed draft. So it's good enough to use, but just remember that there will be some tweaks and changes to this as we move forward. I mentioned the Environment Bill becoming an act in 2021. When that happens, it will mandate the development of nature recovery strategies by local authorities. And so we'd anticipate that will be taken forward in Oxfordshire in 2021 to 22. So hopefully that's given you a good sort of introduction to nature recovery networks in Oxfordshire. It stimulated some thoughts about how it could be relevant to your area, what support you might need, maybe a few questions about the detail as well and the concept. As I say, we're here to help you. I'd like to thank you for listening just now, and keen to discuss more and share, our thinking and develop this concept for for the benefit of the county going forward. Thank you.